Quite a lot has happened so far in this election campaign, but for a second, I want to take you back to the first televised debate between the two current largest parties. Rishi's opening remarks went something like this.
Uncertain times call for a clear plan and bold action.
Clear plans, coming from a man who had to duck out on D-Day commemorations because he forgot that he had somewhere else to be. But anyway, this clear plan point. It's very clear to me at the minute that neither of the two largest political parties are being all that clear about their plans at the moment, with a major question hanging over everything these guys say.
Where is the money coming from?
This is the big question for me, because promises of fixing the NHS, public transport, or whatever policy you want to pick, all of it means nothing if there's no focus on how it's going to be funded, or what's going to lose funding as a result. Where will the money come from? Watching these two bicker the other night, you'd be excused for thinking they don't agree on much. I mean, Rishi here looks like he wants to slap Keir around the face. But both Labour and the Conservatives have committed to exactly the same thing in a key area relating to this question of how will they pay for things. Jeremy Hunt and Rachel Reeves have both stated they will have debt as a share of national income, the debt to GDP ratio falling by the fifth and final year of the forecasting period. Currently, the UK's debt is equal to between 90 and 98% of GDP of the country, depending on if you include the Bank of England's debt or not. So we owe basically 100% of the value of the goods and services that we produce in a single year. Both parties have said that they want that percentage to decline. At the same time, they want to fix the NHS, public services, and every other problem that the UK has. So say it with me one more time.
Where is the money coming from?
This task of reducing debt as a fraction of national income has arguably never been harder. To help visualise this, I want to show you a graph produced by the IFS. I want to say thank you also to the IFS for the work that they do, holding both parties accountable in this period. I've included a load of their resources below, and I think Paul Johnson and his team do excellent research, and it's why I lean on it so much on this channel. So along the bottom here, we have GDP growth. If the economy is growing, it makes it easier to reduce the debt to GDP ratio as GDP is getting bigger. On this side, we have interest rates. The lower the interest rates are, the easier it is to get the debt down, as interest payments on the debt are lower. It's easier to pay off a debt with 0% interest than it is with 20% interest as an example. This area here is the best place to be. A period of high growth and low debt interest makes it easy to get the national debt as a percentage of GDP down. There have been 2 to 3 governments that have enjoyed such conditions. This section is less favourable in that growth of the economy is low, but so is debt interest, so it's not all that bad. The majority of governments have found themselves in these conditions. Here we have high growth and high debt interest. Not ideal, but not terrible. It's this section right here that's the worst place to be. A combination of low growth and high debt interest payments is the worst of both worlds. Where do you think right now the UK is forecasted to sit? Right here. The latest official forecasts are that the government will face lower than average nominal GDP growth, 3.6% a year, and higher than average debt interest spending, 3.3% a year, the worst of both worlds. The IFS themselves do acknowledge that these forecasts can be wrong and we might get lucky. Historically speaking, it is unusual to have a combination of low growth and high interest rates on debt. But let's just say then that's what we get, and both the parties stick to their promise of getting the debt ratio down. That will mean little to no room to borrow money to fund things like reducing the NHS waiting lists. So okay, if you have a pile of debt and you can't borrow your way out of it, what can you do? Well, you can increase your income. And the fastest way for the UK government to increase their income is to raise taxes. Before we get into that, let me tell you about today's video sponsor, Manual. I've been using Manual now for probably over a year, and I've been really happy with the service and the results. My hair now is becoming a bit unruly, to be honest with you. I don't really know what to do with it. I mean, take a look at what it looks like now compared to the podcast a year ago. All of the treatments they provide are clinically proven, such as minoxidil, which has extensive academic research discussing its effectiveness at slowing and reversing hair loss. The sign-up process is super easy, so you just go onto their website, fill out a questionnaire, they then send you the treatments in the post, and there's no need for an appointment or to leave your house or anything like that. They've also recently started offering UK-based hair transplants, so if you're thinking about one of those, it might be worth checking them out before you take a trip to Turkey and then, you can't get back into the country because you're looking like this. If you use my code to order, Manual, you'll get 55% off your first order, and I'll leave all the details below for you. Right, let's get back to the video. Both parties have explicitly stated they will not raise any of the 3 big taxes, VAT, national insurance or income tax. Let's first of all be very clear that both parties at this point will be raising your taxes in the next few years. This is a predetermined certainty. The ongoing freeze of income tax thresholds, which has another 3 years to run, is a huge rise in the tax on workers. And both Labour and Conservatives seem committed to keeping this in place at the minute. So they're all going to raise your taxes. They're just talking about taxes on top of the tax rises that they've already scheduled in. This reminds me of when I used to work full time. I used to get my pay slip a few days before getting paid. And what I would do is I would budget all of the money that I knew was coming. And then actually when I got paid, it's kind of like it didn't make a difference anyway. I'd already spent all of the money. So once it landed, it was all gone in a sense. This is the exact same for these planned tax rises, which are only just enough to stabilise debt in 5 years. So the planned rises in taxes over the next 3 years through the freezing of tax bands is only just enough to stabilise debt in the UK. That money has already been spent and allocated for. So we want to fix the UK. We don't want to borrow any money because we want to see debt as a percentage of GDP coming down. This is going to be difficult, as we've seen. We also don't want to be seen as a party who will tax hard-working folk, so we'll just ignore the freezing of income tax bands, a tax imposed on workers. And any talk of tax rises, let's just redirect that to chat about non-doms and school fees because they're popular with the voting majority, but give little mention to the fact that these taxes will raise next to nothing in meaningful revenue. No more debt, no more taxes. That leaves one area that the government can focus on, spending. If you can't borrow and you can't earn more, you have to cut spending. You can't avoid it. It's currently implied that there will be cuts to spending to unprotected budgets within the public sector. So protected areas are health and defence, and they will receive the increases that they've been promised. The IFS again have put together a graphic that shows what this might look like. We see there is this forecasted 1% increase in the day-to-day spending and then up to 2.9% increase in the funding for protected areas like the NHS, defence, schools. This means everything else will need to come down, and the IFS thinks that those cuts could be as much as 3.5%. Unprotected areas might include prisons, courts or local government. Might not sound all that bad, but from first-hand experience, 12 months ago, I was attacked by a random stranger outside of a nightclub. Just sucker punched in the head, I didn't even see it coming. 12 months on, that case is only just going to court now, as that's how long it takes to process the things through the court system because it's so slow. For those 12 months, the person who attacked me has just been going about their day-to-day lives, roaming the streets. As a citizen of the UK, how do you feel knowing that violent criminals are allowed to walk around for 12 months prior to going to court and facing any form of prosecution? Also, if you're relying on eyewitnesses, what's the chance of them giving an account that's coherent 12 months after the event? Cuts in things like the probation services and prison budgets lead to innocent people dying. That is not an exaggeration, it's a proven fact. And I just question how much is left to cut from these services which are already struggling to function. The problem is the voting public care about schools and the NHS, rightfully so, but little thought is given to the criminal justice system until its failings smack you in the face. Good education and healthcare is essential, but so is being able to walk the streets and feeling safe. At the end of the day, I cost the NHS and the police money because I was attacked. These systems don't exist in isolation. Underfunding here piles pressure onto other services over there. I appreciate that compromises must be made, but a lot of those compromises are made on the basis of what is politically palatable and not what leads to a safer country for us all to live in. I've linked an interactive tool from the IFS below that is a good exercise for anyone interested in this stuff. So what it lets you do is pretend to be the Chancellor and you can set spending and tax policy. It shows you really that this is not an easy thing to pull off well. And these two know that. My issue is I'm not sure how honest or direct they're being about that fact. The government has three choices. It can cut spending, it can implement tax rises above and beyond the tax rises we already have coming, or they can borrow more money. The problem is, in an attempt to win the election, they're reluctant to commit to any of this. Even worse, they're point blank ruling some of it out. I suspect if Labour wins, they will go in and go, oh God, guys,
it's worse than we thought.
We're sorry, those promises we made, we can't stick to them because the Conservative government left it in such a mess and we've only just realised. Liam Byrne, Chief Secretary to the Treasury under Gordon Brown, famously left a note to his successor that read, I'm afraid there's no money left. This sort of story implies that the party coming in doesn't really know the damage until they get into number 10 and take a look around. But again, to quote the IFS, for a party to enter office and then declare things are worse than expected would be fundamentally dishonest. The next government does not need to enter office to open the books. Those books are transparently published and available for all to inspect. As a country, we've had our fair share of promises that have turned out to be misleading or lies at best. I'm still waiting for that bus to show up with 350 million quid a week on it, but I guess it takes a while for it to get here from the EU. So over the next few weeks, whenever you hear a politician speak, remember to keep that most important question front and centre in your mind.
Where is the money coming from?